Welcome to the Soul Fam Podcast. I'm Diana Marquetta, host of the Soul Fam Podcast. I ask you to like and subscribe at the end of this, and please share this really special, magical, important episode with Barbara With. Barbara has been a psychic channel since 1987. She is an author and a musician. I am very emotionally immersed in one of her books right now called Imagining Einstein. She is very tight with Albert Einstein, if that's appropriate to say. Albert Einstein and the party. She's been channeling his messages for many years. She is now on a world tour for conflict, revolution, creating peace around the world. And there's no accident that Barbara and I are here today to talk about conflict revolution and Barbara's role as a channeler for peace and tranquility and understanding around the world. Thanks, Barbara, for being here today. What are you up to today?
Oh, Diana, thanks for having me. I love these conversations. Right now, I landed in Norway a couple of days ago, and I'm got 2 weeks in Europe. And the biggest thing is I'm here to present to the Science of Consciousness conference in Barcelona. On July 8th, I will give my presentation to all of the scientists of the world. And oddly, or coincidentally or not, July 9th is the 70th anniversary of the reading of Einstein's last words in London, July 9th, 1955. It was called the Russell-Einstein Manifesto. And the basic message was, hey, world leaders, find peaceful ways to resolve your conflicts because no one will survive World War III. And the fact that it's almost to the day 70-year anniversary that I'm going to then address Einstein from beyond the grave to give this message to the top scientists in the world is kind of mind-blowing for me, even after all I've been through in my life to get here. So that's my exciting journey right now. There's other things happening, but that's the gist of it.
I mean, it's remarkable. Quite honestly, there's no mistake whatsoever. I didn't actually know that's why you were in Barcelona. So tell me a little bit about that, because I'm sure our audience is curious about that in particular. I really want to know about your own spiritual journey, but tell us about this conference coming up and your presentation there.
This is the first annual Science of Consciousness conference put on by the University of Arizona, Tucson. And 31 years ago, they started with all left brain scientists trying to discover what is consciousness. And every year, they studied and did what scientists do, which is get together and talk and debate and share. Slowly, psychologists started to arrive. And then the meditators started to arrive, and the Rumi poets started to arrive. And so in the 30th annual conference in Arizona last April, I applied just because for all of these years I've been channeling Einstein, I've been saying, get me in front of the scientists and let me see if this is viable. And I have had brushes. But when this conference came up a year ago, I thought, well, I'm just going to apply to see what they do. And they picked me to be in what they called the poster session, which is basically you make a big poster and you stand in front of it for several hours, and whoever comes by, you can have conversations with. And then this year, it was in Barcelona. And so I applied in December and thought, let's see what happens this year. And I was giving a spot speaking.
Oh, wow. Congratulations. That will be exciting. I wish I was there to see it. I bet our audience would love to see it too. But tell me, can you give us a few notes about some highlights?
Well, when I channeled the book, you're reading Imagining Einstein, Essays on M Theory, World Peace, and the Science of Compassion. That was when I had discovered that I was speaking to Einstein some years before, and that's a whole story. But when I got to that book, I said, I want to just do a book for Einstein. I just want to channel a book on a 100-year anniversary of his miracle year. So I did all these channeling sessions. I had no idea what they were going to say. I had no investment in what they were going to say. And what happened was he came out and basically said, I'm going to give you a unified field theory
Mhm.
which is something no one has had yet, and he certainly didn't in life. And it includes what he calls the map of human consciousness, which is how our consciousness interacts with energy in order to create the physical world. And the biggest and still most breathtaking information he gave me was defining compassion with a capital C as the first fundamental force of the universe. It's the creative intelligence that uses the other four fundamental forces to impel the creation of the physical world one step at a time. And I was channeling this and editing it, and I'm not a scientist. I started
Mhm.
out as a musician and a composer,
Mhm.
and I had no idea if this was viable. And when he said the source of everything is in the center of the planet, and it operates like a black hole.
Hmm.
And this is 2005, and I'm
Mhm.
not a scientist. And I'm saying to myself, what? I have to go on stage and tell people, scientists, I have no idea if this is even a viable idea. But up until that time, the level of information and the trust that I had was so thorough because of my own skepticism and investigation and research
Mhm.
that I just went with it and published the book. And now you can go on YouTube and Google Brian Greene. He's a string theorist, and he says the same thing. Black holes aren't just big things that eat planets. They can be small, and he thinks the Earth originates in the center of one.
Hmm.
So my presentation to I got 20 minutes,
Okay.
and part of it is going to be, I did this master class that I have on my website,
Mhm.
and it's the whole thing. It's the complete presentation of all my Einstein material, including a whole video of how we start from nothing and we end up with infinity and every one of those steps along the way. And because we have this great technology where you can get music and videos and photographs, so I produced it and put it all together. And I'm going to have a very succinct clip of here it is. Here's the unified field theory for you. And then we'll see.
Well, having read just a little bit so far, it makes complete sense to me. So, and I am certainly not a scientist, although I have a great interest in the metaphysical and a great interest personally in Albert Einstein, and have a few of his books. So, is compassion love? Is that the creative force? And he and you are not the first person to say that we come from love. Love being a very different force than how we might typically think of. It's not romantic love. It's a force field. Perhaps that's not the right term. You tell me.
Well, in a sense, it's love. But what he says is that compassion, as this first fundamental force, it has an effect upon how matter manifests. So
Okay.
the first thing that it does, like a compass that draws circles, the old school compass,
Right.
compassion impels energy to step out of the 0 point, nothing, and create one circular membrane domain that he calls a compilation of consciousness.
Mhm.
So, like a compass that draws circles, compassion impels energy to create these domains. And my compilation surrounds all of the mathematics in everything, right? Nothing to everything. That's going to be my world.
Mm.
All my DNA, space time, all the programming is in here. The second thing it does, like a compass that aligns to true north,
Mhm.
it aligns all of our compilations to true north of the planet because we're all in the center
Mm.
of the planet now.
Mhm.
So we're all on the same map. We all have the same legend. And then the third thing that it does is more like what you're talking about, is that it programs every compilation to understand that it is one part of a whole, that we are
Right.
all one. And so the system operates for the good of the whole. And I think that's the closest definition to the classical sense of loving each other
Mhm.
that it imbues in that definition.
Right, because we coexist and we're stemming from the same location, basically, if that's how we want to look at it. It's theoretical, from a theoretical standpoint, it's not an actual location, but or is it
Yeah.
in the black hole that's in the center of the earth?
Yes.
And then our compilation, which is our cells, our energy, this matter that is this the compilation of me and of my world and of my auric field uh, comes from that and moves forward. Although forward's not the right term either.
Well, if we're looking at the map, what
Uh-huh.
happens is our compilations in the center of the planet send out a gravitational wave
Mm-hmm.
from the center to the surface. And this part of the wave, it's the non-physical part of us. These contain what we call the 3 human dimensions, and we can get to that. But when
Okay.
it gets to the surface of the Earth, it breaks forth and creates what we call the lens. So we're sitting in the lens. There's my computer. There you are. There's the glass. And so from the compilation, the wave travels up, and then sort of like a prism. A prism separates white light into all the colors and slows it down. The lens slows all that wave down, separates it out into everything it's programmed to be. And so it's creating our physical body that's projecting and perceiving the entire creation. And the lens is actually, that is the byproduct. Even though it's only 10% of the whole entire operating system, there's the hologram, there's the matrix that everybody's saying, you know, it's a simulation. Yeah, it is. We're all simulated in this way, though. And so what we do in conflict resolution is we teach people how to operate the whole system, not just our intellects.
Right.
Not just in the lens. We understand how the whole system works.
Okay. So I really want to know first about your journey. And then my other question is, if that's what we're going to do, how does that resolve conflict?
Okay. So you want to know about my journey?
Yeah, let's do your journey first, Barbara.
Okay.
I hate to back up, but
No,
I think
that's
it's
okay.
really important because I have a feeling that actually will explain a lot about how we work through this prism in order to do conflict revolution, which might be a good idea right this moment.
Yeah, exactly. It's a great idea. Well, I started out with music.
Oh.
So when I was 4 or 5, I started teaching myself piano. I started writing music when I was 12 or 13. And by the time I was out of high
Thank you for
school, I was
joining
on the
us for
road.
this
I had 2
episode
solid
of the
sets
Soul
of
Fam
original material, and
podcast.
I was
Be
in
sure
rock
to
and roll,
tune
and that
into
was
every
1972.
episode
And
where we
that
dive into a different
experience of
rabbit
music
hole
writing
of the
is
known
what
and
channeling is.
unknown
Because I would go
to
into
empower
nothing.
you
I'd say I
in
was like in outer
conscious
space, and I
living
would listen
and
for the
exploration
words.
of the
You know,
greater
I'd hear 4
universe.
bars of some melody
We
and
hope
words,
you leave
and
each
I'd pull it in, and then I'd
episode with
listen
a
some
little
more, and
stardust
pretty soon I
in
had
your
this
hair
very complex
and
song.
inspiration in
And
your
I
heart.
did that for many
With love
years
from
while
your
I
soul
was
fam.
also visiting a woman. Her name was Eunice. She was Mike's mom in high school. And he's like, you got to come and see what my mom does. It's like, what does your mom do? Well, she was a channel. And it was 1970. We didn't call her a channel. But she would light a candle and she had a picture of Jesus and she'd close her eyes. And she said she never remembered what she said, but she went into outer space. And I thought, well, I can relate to that. And her readings were so profound. They were very psychologically oriented. It wasn't so much about predicting the future, although there was that in there. They were all about, because I was very traumatized as a child, and probably why my gifts were so intense. And she helped me basically learn self-love. And so I've studied with her for 15 years.
Wow.
And in 1987, when I was writing a letter to a friend and suddenly my hands had a mind of their own and were writing incredible messages, I knew what it was. But it was still like, what is this? So that's how I started channeling. And after doing this for 5 years, I gave a few readings to a couple of friends, and then I just got referrals. But no one ever talked about it. They would come to my house and sit down and have the reading, and then they'd go and they'd come back in 6 months. So in 1993, I wanted to do a group. Like, what would these voices, whoever they are, I was an antenna as far as I was concerned. That was my mentor.
Right.
I started to do groups.
I want to ask a question about channeling because it's very popular at the moment on YouTube to do a lot of channeling. There's a lot of channeling going on. I caution a little bit about it. So, how do you receive channeling? How do you receive channels? How do you receive messages? And do you have an opinion about channeling and what works? I sort of feel like there's a protocol in a way, or there's safety guards for it, because sometimes I wonder, gee, if we're reaching into the ethers, what are we really receiving, and how do we know that I'm really getting Albert Einstein, or I'm really getting Metatron, or I'm really getting Jesus? Did you feel that way? Did you have this sense of who specifically these messages were coming from? Or were they just guides from other people or from your guides?
Well, like I said, when I started, there wasn't any guides. It was
R
just I was an antenna,
Right?
and I was picking up your higher power that wanted to talk back to your human mind.
Mm,
And I figured if I wasn't accurate, people wouldn't come back.
right.
They were getting what I had been getting, which was this boost of self-love, how to take care of myself, how to live a better life. So when I started to do groups with Kim and Teresa, that's a long story, they came into my life, but they
Mhm,
asked in the beginning, who are you?
mhm,
I did a channel for the three of us. And the answer was, you can call us angels. And I said, what? What? Because regardless of, like you said, you go, angels, regardless of that, I was skeptical. And I think
mhm.
we need to be skeptical because
Right.
truth will withstand skepticism.
Hmm.
And the three of us talked and we said, you know what? We don't care if it's the Easter Bunny because what they're telling us is
Ah,
changing our lives so much for the better.
mhm,
And I think that's the answer is you know it by its fruits.
mm,
You know if it's real and resonates, if it's real and resonating in your heart. You know if you listen to channeling, if it resonates with you or if it doesn't resonate with you. And there's a lot of messages, and this is no different, right? Than, say, the news or public
mhm,
information. There's a
mhm, mhm.
lot of information. And there's a lot of people channeling, a lot of young people channeling on YouTube
Yeah.
who are channeling some outer space, Pleiadians, like non-human entities. And me personally, because of what I've been through, put through a rigorous test of skepticism, I don't resonate with a lot of that. And not because they're bad or wrong, it's
Right.
just people find their level and you'll go deeper or you won't go deeper. And
Mhm.
you must decide that, I think, intuitively.
I think that's interesting in with regard to the energy that comes through the lens in order to create compassion through the prism. So that's part of why I asked that question. It's sort of a roundabout way of trying to get to this equation through your personal journey as well. So you started giving groups and doing these sort of larger sessions. What was the response to that? And then what presence kind of came forth for you?
Well, what these angels told us was they said they had this theory, and it was a theory about if humans would resolve conflicts in this particular way they were going to show us.
Hmm.
Their theory was byproduct would be world peace, but they needed humans to test their theory. And that's what the three of us were about.
Huh.
And so we set up, we were all excited because this was incredible information changing our lives. And eventually we had our first conflict. And we took what we had been channeling, these master sessions. They were telling, this is the 6 steps to peace if you're going to do it. And so we became the guinea pigs and we
Hmm.
tested it on our real life conflicts. And I think this is a major difference between our channeling, my channeling, and other channeling of anybody I've never heard been
Mhm.
instructed by the entity.
Mhm.
Here's a process, go test it. And it did. It worked like
Hmm.
mind-bogglingly well. And after the first fight, when we were fighting and I was like, wait a minute, let's get the transcript. And I read that if you're involved in a conflict, the root of your part is within you. And that, for all of us who were projecting, which we all do,
Mhm.
was
Exactly.
revolutionary. It's like, wait a minute, what does that mean? And when we all sat there and kind of got it in this Satori type of moment, I was able to come back to the table and say, wait a minute, here's what I need to do. Instead of looking at Kim and saying, you got to do this and you got to do that.
Right.
And she was able to come back and go, yeah, and here's what I need to do. And we had this huge revolution. But what was profound was that night I went to work, I was singing at a piano bar in Minneapolis. And
Mhm.
there was a waitress there who had never had the time of day for me. And I don't care. It happens. You just don't care. She could not get enough of me. Oh, Barbara, I've got some Patti Smith cassettes. And she put $20 in my tip jar. And I thought, what is going on here? And then I got it in my head. This is what happens when we change here. The byproduct is peace outside us, and we don't know
Yeah.
how that's going to happen. But I could never have sat down with that woman and said, hey, how come you don't like me? And gotten the
Mhm.
same kind of changing response. So that was really the beginning of decades of research into conflict resolution.
So, in these tests that you were sort of allowed to have, these conflicts, did it apply not only to your personal interaction with each other, but did other situations sort of magically come up that tested that theory of conflict? Because I would sort of assume that if it's, let's say the two of you girls are having a discussion or argument or whatever, then there's something else that's going to happen to once again test that theory again, or test that question in yourself. Am I making sense?
Yes, it
Okay,
was, and it was a constant testing process
got
because
it.
we all have conflicts. But every time that we were able to do it in this different way,
Mhm.
we got instantaneous, and I couldn't replicate it. Like I was saying about the waitress, I couldn't replicate the
Right.
results had I gone right at it in the arena that's being created.
So how do we apply that in a bigger way, both on a personal level and then for all of us? I mean, I of course can bring in my own personal experience. I'm living in Los Angeles at the moment. We're full of conflict right now on multiple levels. But I think this is happening around the world. It doesn't really matter that I'm in this little, you know, microcosm at the moment. There's other things going on around the world, obviously, with our own government, Iran, Israel, and not to be political at all,
Yes,
because it really comes back to this core of the essence of the compilation. Is that
yes.
right? Okay.
Well, the process has to move through space time, right? So
Okay.
there's no magic pill that we take that, "Oh, suddenly I'm going to manifest, blah, blah, blah." But the testing is how we respond
Mm.
in these situations. So with Kim and Teresa, through the many years of us having conflicts amongst us and using our process and coming and going, we know that my responsibility is my domain.
Hmm.
My responsibility is what I think, what I feel, what I sense, the emotions, how I deal with that, how I respond to the world. That is our job. And that's not going to change the world necessarily instantly. Like suddenly you're going to do conflict revolution in LA and suddenly all the riots are going to stop and
Yeah.
everything. But one at a time, if
Mhm.
we change our local universe.
Right.
And revolutionary can be, I've had a client in a workshop who had a conflict with her mother-in-law for 25 years.
Mhm.
Within one day of her revolving it back and finding out the root of her conflict, we call it the Rolodex effect. 25 years, flip, 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 flip. She had to reevaluate her
Mhm.
mother-in-law for 25 years.
Mhm.
So those kinds of shifts are what we need to do as humans. And you know as well as I know, I'm totally with you. This is not a political thing.
Mhm.
But what I try to help people do is get out of the propaganda of their own mind that has them
Mm.
projecting onto that political group or that political group, because we all know this is the byproduct of civilizations who have been built on fear.
Mhm.
And also the United States, probably for 80 years, the whole government has been pushing us towards this.
Mhm.
So there's no going to be some overnight sensation. But
Right.
if we fight amongst ourselves, this is the reflection of this inner fight
Hmm.
that we
Got it.
have. And when we stop the inner fight, we affect all of these relationships that we have. And that's all we can do, really.
Okay. So you're also a psychic. Do you feel like there's the opportunity or that there's a chance that because if we allow ourselves to look at ourselves internally, collectively speaking, we could resolve this conflict amongst ourselves. We could resolve a world conflict by resolving the conflict within ourselves. Is
It's a
that my
theory.
grandiose thinking?
Yes, but it is the theory. And
Mm.
when I did a book called Party of 12, the
Mhm.
afterlife interviews, and that's where I met Einstein. And in that I also did a channel with Princess Di
Oh.
on the 1-year anniversary of her death. as requested by a metaphysical tabloid in London who
Oh.
didn't want the interview. But her whole message was, if everyone who left flowers on the palace when I died would do conflict resolution, we'd have world peace in a day.
Hmm.
It's just, how do we get our friends and neighbors to stop fighting amongst ourselves?
Mhm.
And it just starts with me. I have to just stop fighting with my neighbors who maybe don't share political views with me.
Mhm.
It doesn't mean you have to bring everybody into your inner circle,
Right.
but we have to detach and quit projecting our stuff all over the place. And then in conflict revolution, we teach you basically what is manifestation. How
Mm.
do we go from manifesting all this conflict to manifesting that change within our lives? And we just have to start with ourselves. There's just no other possible pathway forward unless each of us take responsibility for ourselves.
We love manifestation on YouTube. So tell me about we love it. And honestly, it's a way for us not only to get what we want, but I think it is a way for us to become more connected to ourselves in a very deep way. If that's really what you want. It's not just about shiny cars and new houses or whatever. There's a manifestation within ourselves that's actually possible. Is that right?
There is, and yet let me tell you a quick story about manifestation. Since the time I was 5 years old and could hold a hairbrush like it was a microphone, all I ever wanted to be was a rock star.
Mhm.
Every single minute of my day, and I wrote these songs, and I was on the road. I was not just an armchair rock star. I was
Mhm.
traveling and singing, and that was if the typical rules of manifestation were supposed to work,
Mhm.
I should have been a rock star. But manifestation isn't just about, hey, I need a new car, or hey, I need this or that. It's about finding out what is truly in our soul,
Mhm.
greater than what our conscious minds think we want. Oh, I want to be a rock star. Well, you know what? At this age, I'm glad I wasn't. What a crazy kind of sick life
Mhm.
it would have been at that age for me. I probably wouldn't have survived.
Mhm.
So there's a balance between, yeah, I want to manifest this and letting go of it. And what I say, instead of trying to get what you want what you have.
Mhm.
Create that abundance and we're creating it. I'm creating the computer. I'm creating this room right here. So are we going to dedicate ourselves to working for the good of the whole, starting with ourselves?
Mhm.
Because then we have a much better chance of manifesting our greatest good, which might be something different than what we think we want.
Right. Exactly. I mean, you are a rock star. I mean, you're going to Barcelona, you're presenting before all these scientists.
I
I mean,
know.
that's pretty cool. I'd say that's pretty much
I
being a
guess I
rock
kind of
star.
am. I know.
I don't know. I don't want to miss Einstein here. And I feel like his voice is present in all of this. And in the party of 12. Who's in the party of 12?
The party of 12, well, it started out with Diana,
Okay.
because that was the thing. And they didn't want the interview with the tabloid. And my agent and I said, well, maybe there's other famous dead people who want to talk.
Yeah.
I mean, this was all new to me. It was like, channel Diana, how do you do that?
Mm.
And so we made this list. And in my head, I would go to, Elvis. And he's like, no, I'm getting in too much trouble. Mother Teresa was tired and Gandhi said it all. And so we had this list. And when we got to John F. Kennedy,
Mm.
which was a really fascinating interview now, all these years later, that we're kind of finding out what happened. And it was very accurate what he said. He said to us, look, this was not your idea. Put your list away. We're a group of souls in afterlife who have gathered here to give you this information to help you have world peace. And we'll
Mm.
tell you who's coming up next. And Einstein wasn't even on our list.
Mm.
Which is why I think they had to stop and do that. It's like, are they not getting it? And so when Einstein came up, and I'll never forget, I was in my agent's bathroom in Manhattan. It was a thunderstorm. And I started to channel. This was the voice of every reading I'd ever given. And it took me about 3 years to come to terms with that. It was the voice of sound.
What do you
And
mean?
it means that when you when I was channeling all those years, I'm an antenna. there was a voice that came out of me. It was very distinctive. It had this weird little accent that I could never replicate when I
Right.
wasn't channeling. And when I got with the girls, they're like, "What is that weird accent?" And so, but it was everything. And so when I sat down and said, "Okay, let's imagine Einstein in front of me," and it was that voice, it was stunning to me because the implications were, okay, you weren't just angels. You can call us angels. You didn't say we are angels. Is the sound? This was all Einstein? Yeah, it was a fairly big head trip that took me about 3 years to finally come out of the closet. And I only came out of the closet because 9/11 had just happened.
Okay, so why? Why did that change things?
Because this was the first time that war had come to the shores of the United States of America. And I had all of
Mhm.
in the party, there was Sigmund Freud, Anwar Sadat, Gianni Versace, Jesus of Nazareth, and they all had this message of world peace. And they all had a piece of culture. Johnny
Mm.
Versace had the modeling kind of deviant thing, and
Mhm.
Marilyn Monroe, Norma Jean Baker, she had
Mhm.
feminism and female divine energy. So everybody had a piece of the thing.
That's so
And I just
interesting.
thought, I have so much information here. I should not be afraid to bring it out because it's so beautiful. And whether people believe it's Einstein or not, or
Mhm.
JFK. And so that began when I was finally working out of that kind of fear of revealing that I think I'm talking to Einstein. But it's still been a long journey to come to that kind of reality.
That acceptance. Is it also because, I mean, Einstein's pretty brilliant. So there's some theories here, I mean, that I wish I understood more thoroughly from his standpoint, understood how his mind worked. Perhaps it's not necessary, but I'm intrigued by it. So was that part of your sort of acceptance of, really getting your head around, or really getting your soul around some of his theories so that you can translate it to an audience like ours?
Yes, because there's a lot of information that if it's not articulated
Mhm.
in a simpler way,
Mhm.
it just, I mean, it's for those
It's
of
gonna
us
get
who,
lost.
yeah, it's going to get lost. And I think that's why the psychic sorority, who was me and Kim and Teresa, got the
Hmm.
6 steps to peace. And then I went off to discover that I was going to talk to Einstein. Kim went off, and she was always she loved Jesus. She wasn't a Christian. She knew the Bible inside out. So she went on to write a book called Second Coming, Awakening the Christ Within,
Oh.
to kind of handle
Mhm.
Christianity and the
Mhm.
Bible and some of the mythology of that. I went on to do the scientific Einsteinian
Mhm.
conflict revolution stuff. And all of it not all the Einstein stuff got parboiled down to something very simple, but it does. Like
Mhm.
I have what I call the Conflict Revolution Challenge on my website, where you can go for no cost, download an little instruction manual for conflict resolution, test yourself or teach yourself. And then I have a workbook, a 12-week workbook, where you can go for 12 weeks and we guide you through. Every week we learn a different part of the process, and you begin to learn how to do conflict, put it in your operating system. So this is how I deal with conflict now. It doesn't mean I don't have conflict or I'm
Mhm.
totally manifesting everything perfectly. But when conflict does come up, I have a process that detaches me from it
Mhm.
so that I can find the creative solution for the good of all for it, rather than
Right.
using it as a war field, because that's what we're doing now.
Right.
We're using each other as a battlefield.
Hmm. Wow, I have never thought of it like that, but we
Yeah.
are. I think
Hmm.
I'm so golly, I'm just standing here strong in my opinion. It's so important, but and it's based off this research and these facts, but the truth is, just right. It's just between us. I'm just
Yeah.
using them to make my point.
Yes. And if you were theoretically
Uh,
like looking for the truth, and you found the truth within you and your body knows it's the truth, you don't seek outside validation.
right.
You're open to, that's why I'm totally First Amendment
Mm.
absolutist, because I think we need to be having these conversations. And I
Right.
love to see the world right now. There's this huge, I'm a big X fan, there's huge conversation all over the place about peace or not peace or this or that. And I'm watching it all, celebrating that we're having these conversations,
Mhm.
but also identifying that you people over here, you're telling these peace voices, you're like hitting the ball below the belt and you're trying to be right and you're kind of, and these people are like, you're still a neocon and this is a, and that's good. I mean, it's good we're talking, but if we could take it a step further and if everyone could apply conflict revolution, first of all, you'd be too busy taking care of yourself and all of your decisions that you made that were disrespectful or all the things that we don't like in other people. If we turn our focus, revolve it to us and go, okay, I'm going to find, because there are, I mean, your ego's going to say, I don't do that,
Mhm.
but we're human. And when you get the focus off those people and you start to do it on yours, two things either happen. One is they rise to the occasion, like the waitress, or they disappear.
Mhm.
And not like you do anything to make them disappear. It's just when your
Right.
energy changes and you
Right.
don't need to pull them in to have this drama to teach you this. It's one or the other.
Right, because you're no longer projecting that, so you're no longer sort of attracting that.
Yes.
It's no longer present. Okay, so what are the first is there a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 conflict revolution
Yes.
steps?
Yes.
Is there time for us to at
Yes.
least go through a sentence or two of those? Because I think they're probably
Absolutely.
more complicated, but
No,
but
it's much
okay,
simpler than
good.
you know.
Oh.
Okay. 3 human dimensions: emotion, solar
Mhm.
plexus, intuition, heart, intellect, brain.
Mm.
When we're aligned to compassion, that compassion is flowing up through us into our emotional, it starts with emotion, which is
Mhm.
the fuel of manifestation of the physical world. So it's more than just feelings,
Mhm.
but that's in there. And we want them all. We want them all moving up through us. We don't want just the nice ones, and we don't want to leave behind the anger. We want to, with our breath. So we teach people, first of all, how to process emotion without intellect, without marrying it to a thought that's going to project it on somebody else. And as you do that, intuition gets informed. And intuition is always a small, impelling statement or movement to take one step that's going to be for the good of the whole situation, starting with you. And that's how the system works. But when it gets to intellect, this is where free will exists. So if your intuition tells you turn left,
Mhm.
intuition is not going to be the mechanism that sends the electrical impulses to your hand to grab the steering wheel. That's intellect. So we have basically been given the
Hmm.
power to say no to intuition, which is basically the voice of God and love within us. And
Mm.
that, Einstein says, is where every single conflict in the world originates. So if you wanted to do this, you would wake up every day, get into your witness, say your prayer of gratitude, and then set your intention. I'm going
Right.
to get to know myself. What am I thinking? What am I feeling? How am I processing my feelings? What is intuition? And we begin this journey to understand our operating system in order to master it.
Do you feel like our leaders of the world can do that, or is there any interest in that whatsoever?
It's a tough one because it really is about, like, my domain is my responsibility.
Mhm.
I don't have responsibility over anybody else's, including the world leaders. And I think this change needs to happen from the ground up. I
Mhm.
think we as regular human beings
Mhm.
need to stop fighting amongst ourselves. And once we do that, there's going to be a whole sea change shift in how everything works. And in a very odd, kind of far away way, they make America great again,
Mhm.
if it's working or not.
Uh-huh.
The concept was kind of conflict revolutionary. Let's
Mm.
make sure our domain is in order before we go pointing our finger at anybody else. But
Yeah.
does that mean any world leader would do that? I have no idea. I would
Right.
hope, it's my intention to get in front of them to introduce this and the Conflict Revolution Institute, and maybe in this new education system that's being birthed from the ground up, we can get some of it in there and get our children, who are probably much closer to understanding this than we are.
Right. They don't necessarily have these bad habits yet.
Yes.
Well, and then as a collective, I mean, our consciousness as a collective shifts things. Doesn't necessarily even the collective is stronger than the individual.
I think when we're joined in compassion,
Mhm.
it is the biggest synergy that could exist on the earth. And I think there's so many people in compassion right now,
Mhm.
even though
So
even
true.
though I'm in compassion, even though we still engage
Mhm.
in these kinds of things, when we tap into compassion, that's when we get to our real power.
That's awesome. That's very powerful. State that again because I want to reinforce that.
When we commit ourselves to compassion and working for the highest good,
Mhm.
we tap into the synergy of all the compassionate energy that everyone is collectively, the prayers, all the religions praying for the peace. We tap into that. And with this process of conflict resolution, Einstein has created a way for us. He calls it, we earn the right to experiment with the manifestation of creation. Manifestation, but only if we're committed to the good of the whole, because otherwise we destroy everything.
I'm curious what he might say right this second about what's happening. Or do you
Sure.
have a message already?
Well, I did an extensive channel yesterday afternoon for my people,
Oh,
and
cool.
um, I think that the message is pretty much always the same right now.
Mhm.
Is that those of us who do this inner work, we cannot underestimate how important that inner work is. And we do. Why am I doing this? It's a big struggle. I'm not making a difference. And that, I think, is the most important message that Einstein would give to the world, is that this inner work, it has to start here. You are a channel. You are a portal. You have been given the power to create life. What are you going to do with it? That's the question that you have to answer for yourself. Are you going to work for peace? Or are you going to try to be right? Because
Mm.
these are two different skills.
Mhm.
So you can be right. It's like you said, you can have all that knowledge, but when you work for peace, it's an entirely different skill set. And that's what we all need to be doing right now.
Is it also about the peace within ourselves? That doing that inner work, if I'm finding peace within myself, I am also creating peace throughout the world.
Yes, and we go from being reactionary. Now,
Mhm.
you walk into a room, a lot of people do this, they're empaths, and oh, I feel all this negative energy,
Mhm.
to walking into a room going, I am going to surround this room with
Mhm.
my joy and my compassion and my open love for everyone. Do you know how much difference we would all make in the world if we took even that simple shift in our energy rather than, "Oh, these people are going to, I'm
Mhm.
bouncing off this and
Mhm.
bouncing off that." It's
Mhm.
like, no, I'm going to choose to be the change
Right.
and project this. I can't tell you how much difference I've made in my life by doing that.
It's not just about picking up groceries and taking them to the food pantry. It's as simple as making a shift in our own energetic, emotional, intellectual, intuitive state, am I right? Internal state,
Yes. Yes.
and then allowing that or enabling that, like making it our superpower.
Yes. And then intuition will tell you, go bring groceries
Right.
or stay home. And the more we trust that intuitive message, the more we can be in line with what compassion really wants us to manifest for the greatest good.
I think sometimes people may feel like, how can I put an emphasis on this or doing inner work when the kids need to be fed, the petrol needs to be put in the tank, my job is in jeopardy, or my income is in jeopardy, my freelance work, whatever it might be, my marriage is in jeopardy. So I'm trying to suggest that sometimes we perhaps avoid doing the inner work because there's these external things, and we think the external has to come before the internal.
Yes. And that, I think, is the misconception.
Okay.
I think when the internal work is done,
Mhm.
which the way that we do it, this isn't like taking a class. This is like you deciding every day that you're going to learn who you are and how to
Mm.
master yourself. And you can
Mm.
do that no matter what's going on in your life.
Right.
And when we do that, we have that profound effect upon synchronicity. Suddenly you do get a new client, or suddenly, there is something available, a resource there that you didn't think, because you're so caught up in the external world and defining that it's not there. It's not there. I have to work harder. So when we detach from that, do this work, find this alignment, then we're able to manifest our resources and our needs
Mhm.
as we need them. It's not
Mhm.
always easy.
Fascinating. I want to explain to the audience too, just for a second, about how to be a witness.
Yes, there is a position that you can take. You have to intend it. And this is what I do when I wake up. It's like, I fully intend. I'm going to just be aware. I'm going to be aware of what I'm thinking, what I'm intuiting, what I'm feeling, how I'm dealing with it. And it becomes a little schizophrenic, but we have many aspects. As you pointed out, we have 12 aspects in our psyche with different purposes and personalities. And so it's just a way to get to know ourselves out of our heads, because we're all stuck in our heads.
How do you and Einstein bring the theory of relativity into play in conflict revolution?
Because what's happening outside of ourselves
Mhm.
has a direct relationship to what's happening inside ourselves.
Okay.
And just in terms of creating physical reality, like the bottom line of that, there's a certain program that runs, right? Like I said, your computer and my computer, we can recognize them. We have the same legend. However, we as humans have been given the power to have dominion over ourselves, and we will either choose to take it. This is the evolution of human consciousness, right? The birthing of the new earth, all of this stuff, or we won't. And it's up to you to master your domain. It's not my business if you do or not.
Mhm.
The more that I do it, the more I draw to me people who want to do it. And then that's how the synergy starts to
Mm.
kind of swirl around us. And the people who don't want to do it, they'll fall away, find other people to fight with. And that can make a huge difference in your life. Even just the reduction of the stress of the conflict can really open things up.
What are some other messages you're going to be sharing this summer on your world tour?
I think the most important one that we're taking to Barcelona is that message that scientists and world leaders,
Mhm.
they should be the first ones to do this.
Mm.
You as a scientist should not be using your power to create weapons of mass destruction. So how are you going to do that? How do we create it's not morality, but it's just based in compassion, decision making based in compassion for
Mhm.
the good of all. And you can't change everybody, but if you can inspire the people who are in power to do it, but I very much believe this comes from the ground up.
That what we instead of looking to the outside, we have to look to the inside. And really the answers to all of these dilemmas are really internal.
I think it's the place we start. And once we clear up these conflicts, what Einstein just said yesterday was that when you align to compassion, which looks like all your emotions are flowing and intuition is guiding, and intellect is just like observing and listening for intuition and then doing what it tells you, you create a different reality around you
Right.
that then you build off of. And the theory, I think the angels is that if enough people do this,
Mhm.
exponentially, it creates a groundswell of change that we can't go after in the arena it's being played out.
Right. Yeah,
So how do we see peace manifest in the world? How do we see Iran and Israel really find peace? We start with ourselves. It's all we can do. We've got no other control over any of it.
do you hold any special group sessions or weekly or monthly sort of collective expressions by chance? And what else is on your sort of agenda right now?
I actually am July 9th will be my third year. I'll be beginning my third year of my World Peace Tour. And that's when I'm going to launch the Conflict Revolution Challenge. I also have the Conflict Revolution Institute New World Peace Prizes,
Hmm.
because I think that the Nobels were somehow tainted. And I'm going to announce those. And then I hope to have a weekly meeting. I'm not sure what platform, but if you go to
Mhm.
my website, barbarawith.com, and you can sign up for updates and get the Conflict Revolution Challenge, and there's master classes and all kinds of things on there. But I do regular groups, channeling, and I want to do more because I think the time is now.
Because so many of us can join on, because they're done virtually. They can be done virtually. So many of us can join collectively at the same time,
Yes,
which doesn't hurt. Doesn't hurt for all of us to be doing this right now.
that's right.
So it creates a force field.
Hmm. Yeah, and the more compassion that is put into play, the more effect we have on things that we don't think that we can affect.
What's your message, Barbara? We've talked a lot about everybody else's, and I so appreciate the group that's with you. I so appreciate Diana and JFK and Einstein, especially, of course. And I know there's others. But what's your message?
I think my message comes from the core of the work that the psychic sorority has done. It's the basic question: do you want to be right, or do you want to make peace? Because you will choose. And you don't, one is not necessarily exclusive of the other,
Mm-hmm.
because many times I've been right, but I don't want to prove it. I want to make peace.
Mm.
And then when I make peace,
Mm-hmm.
the truth is just the truth. I don't inspire you because Barbara With tells you this. You're inspired by hearing the truth.
Mm-hmm.
It happens to be coming from my mouth.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's my whole message, is that either we're going to keep fighting amongst ourselves, or we're going to reach this evolutionary step where we can collectively start with ourselves on this intense, intricate, intimate level, and then change what manifests.
Amen to that. It's really beautiful. And it feels very heartfelt, Barbara.
It's my life's work.
You girls sound like a lot of fun.
Yes.
I think
Oh, yes.
this is a movie all by itself. It's like the traveling pants. So that's what ooh. One's with Jesus, one's with Einstein, and
Yep.
who's the third party of this? You said there's three of you?
Teresa. There's Teresa.
Teresa.
Yes.
Cool.
And when we became a triad, they told us about these 3 points. You know, honor and articulation was Kim, and that had to do with intellect. I was the visionary, and that had to do with, and then Teresa was the compassion. And so
fun.
she is currently in an undisclosed location in North Carolina, grounding the whole thing, you know, being with her grandkids and just retiring and being in a state of peace. And Lily and I are kind of the ones that volunteered or were chosen to go out into the world and gab about it. But we're all still very much an entity.
Yeah, very active, I sense. So that's very cool. What a beautiful life.
It has been. Thank you. It is. It's only going to get better.
So tell me, how can people get in touch with you? How can we see you? Can we catch up with you on Zoom this summer? Where are you going to be speaking? Where's some of your music? All those good things.
Yes, well, Barbara With, W-I-T-H, like the preposition, barbarawith.com. That's going to have all of my master classes. I've got some incredible meditation downloads to align ourselves. And if you sign up, then you'll get my blog posts and you'll get the announcements. My music is at BARBWITH. barbwith.com.
Okay.
And you can see all of that there. And then we also have Synergy Alliance .llc, and that's all of us. That's the whole psychic sorority. You can find Kim there, and Conflict Revolution, and all of our books and all the podcasts and everything there. And I'd like to offer you and your listeners a special. If you want to reach out to me, if you want a reading, I'm happy to give you an hour reading for a half-hour price.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah,
wow.
I would love to.
Yeah, I wanted to be sure that I mentioned that you do individual readings. So if you mention the Soul Fam podcast, then you can get an
It's
hour
basically
reading
half
for a
off.
half-hour price.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of juicy bits in your readings. So
Oh yeah, they last for years.
Right? I had that feeling. There's a lot of intensity there. That's very cool. Very generous of you. Thank you so much. The audience will love that.
Absolutely.
Myself included. So I don't know how to wrap this up. You bring so much to this audience. You bring so much to YouTube. And I know that you're walking out there into the world with your heart, which is brave, and I'm sure you're going to be very well received in Barcelona. I'm super excited to hear more about that.
Well, let's catch up after.
Okay, I would love that. I would love to
Yeah.
hear what their
Thank you
response
so
was.
much too,
Yes.
Diana. Thank
Thank
you.
you.